This time had to come. In this, the opening statement, attention now passed to the judge. So I ask you this, Supreme Court of Justice, Judge, do you solemnly swear to Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, that you will stand by our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and its Canadian Constitution and use it to bring justice by its fairness, as apologies, reimbursements, reparations, fiduciary, and incivility, as peace is needed, as a payment of respect in the case of defending your home and protecting your family? That, by your sworn duties, these provisions of honest evidence, not that made of fiction, are to be of true force and effect. Is that an agreement? Because I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Because truth is my sword, and karma is my shield. When love conquers all.
So, Judge, why I called this together to bring into question of my concerns over the regarding statements which I am about to address is that they are all tied in. And as I have promised you the whole truth and nothing but the truth, it means giving you the full truth and nothing but the truth. It shows the tie-in of everything that needs to be addressed, because one thing supports another thing affects another, and another thing is overall tied in because of the same thing that's being addressed. Because, speaking as a couple, the both of us have never had our chance at fair trial or had our side really acknowledged, accepted, or understood. And now it's about time that we are given the chance to be able to defend ourselves. And I myself, standing up for myself and my partner, who momentarily cannot speak for herself, as I defend our home and family. So when I bring these issues I address today to you, my judge, my jury, to use the highest authority of kindness in respect to the application of the force and effect that will be applied, because as bad as the things I describe, they may seem so horrific that it would lead to an execution or life sentencing or just vaporization, abolation. Instead, as I said, we are not to become the demon by killing the demon and be as bad as the criminals that we are dealing with. So I request that you, Judge, please do the things that I cannot do myself as a person, but because you, my Judge, are going to be presented the things that I have proven to myself, and by revealing to you, I show you what it is exactly that I mean. As these things I present have proven to me to be very, very inconsistent with the provisions of our Constitution, Charter of Freedoms and Rights, inalienable rights of our universal Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, that we all here in this world are provided and deserve. Even the animals have rights.
Because of the two major issues I find to be very concerning that I present here, because two major issues have factors that interplay between each other, making a causation of a duality of problem, which in this court we should be able to address. And if not all here, we'll have two courts running with the same thing, because the whole truth includes it being all of the truth, not just talking about one little part here. But if we're going to start at any point, it would be the day that I'd gotten the notice to relative that my sweet common law loving partner, Alice Jane Burton, had been detained at RCH. Right at that point, that means the doctors and nurses, they should have been talking to me. They should have been letting me know how it's going, because I've been quite concerned about her medication that they're forcing on her non-consensually, as is involuntary, happens to be clozapine. Now, clozapine, if you haven't heard anything about clozapine, it's been banned in Europe since 1970. It killed way too many patients. And after all, if you remember anything about the Nuremberg Codex, I believe in Europe it's Nuremberger, but we know it as the Nuremberg Codex. And it clearly states that a patient is, or experiment, living human experiment, let's call it, because you never know what the outcome of these treatments are. That's what makes psychiatry always a experimental practice. And if the experimentalness of it has ever been removed, then the medicine itself still. And if you guys all know that these anticholinergics are murder, then still that would go against the Nuremberg Codex as well, because a patient is not to be harmed. And when we're talking about the use of anticholinergics, An anticholinergic happens to be an antipsychotic, or an antidepressant, or an anticonvulsant, an anti-Parkinson's, an antihistamine. There's plenty of opioids, opiates. Like it causes delirium because when it causes hallucinations and disorganized thinking, the things that you call schizophrenia, when it's actually medication induced, because it rips out your nervous system by cutting off the vitamin uptake, and that cuts off your immune system too, because the two are tied in together through an endocrine system of our blood and hormone messengers. So when we're talking about the stage before enterocrites, then we're talking about our immune system, our lymphocytes and our neutrophils and such, the white blood cells that carry our sodium reactions with the calcium and sodium. Anticholinergics essentially cut off the uptake of our vitamin B. So what ends up happening is, if you ever heard about vitamin deficiency describing scurvy or anemia, well, essentially this is the reason why, okay? In the case of clozapine, which is an anticholinergic, it cuts off your vitamin uptake, causing a granulocytosis. That means a compromised immune system, which has been described to many as HIV/AIDS. Now, if these signs point to that the lymphopenia that leads to cancer because of the stopping of an immune system, meaning a compromised immune system, that the only way that people get cancer is that they already are experiencing HIV/AIDS because it's a compromised immune system after all. Then we are taking a look at the practice of these anticholinergics a little bit more seriously, I hope. If they were only designed to create an industry, then that means that the greater public has been enslaved to death. And that would outline problems dating all the way back to the war and that Nuremberg trial. We get the Nuremberg Codex, and where patients are not to be harmed. And that is a fact. And when it comes to involuntary, didn't Abraham Lincoln already free the slaves? Didn't we already have a British end slavery in 1833? Didn't we just have a Supply Chains Act put in place in 2024? So involuntary, that means to anyone, it means slavery. And as I just described what euthanasia is, especially when all of the cancer service, cancer foundations, all of that, all of the AIDS foundations, all that money grubbing foundations that take charity money and all that away from the people that need it to live or to be able to survive in this world. There are people dying on the street, and the streets are definitely a death sentence. As I pointed out, that when we talk about anticholinergics, that includes opiates and opioids. So why would anyone force an opiate addiction on someone involuntary, especially so non-consensual? We only define non-consensual and rape to be tied in, because that's exactly how you define what rape is. And when we're talking about involuntary, being just what nobody wants. If anybody wanted it, it'd be voluntary to them, and it wouldn't be involuntary anymore. So involuntary sticks to as being just that nobody wants it. That would mean that it goes against every single provision of our constitutional rights and amendments in the United States and our Canadian Constitution in our Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, which are the laws that preside over all other laws all across this land and all across the world when we look at the Universal Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms and our inalienable rights. So what is needed? More than anything, is the need for change is evident, so change is what is needed. When it comes to the way of how we have our system designed, because for one thing, psychology happens to be purely educational, and to learn psychology teaches you just that, nothing medical about it. However, medical itself, when you see that they're just creating their own industry, like a bunch of Munchausen syndrome by proxies, and that term is a psychological term for a psychiatrist who injures their client. So the client has to turn to them for treatment, which in this case, the anticholinergic, just causes more problems, okay? And that's pretty much enslavement, especially when you're applying involuntary aspect to it, which is what nobody wants, So just see it for what it is, okay? See it for what it is. Ask anyone from Africa, are you down with doing a little involuntary until you die? They would probably probably freak out, okay? Because that means some reparations are in order, okay? Like, I'm serious. Like, freeing slaves, the abolition of the slavery that's taking place as involuntary patients go. And what we are going to have to do about these off-the-chart records about how many murders have taken place when we see AIDS is having over 100 million deaths and cancer, which, again, compromised immune system described by the anticholinergic treatments, is around 10 million a year. Now, if we're looking at global numbers, okay, global numbers, this affects a great population of our global numbers, seeing as there's 8 billion people in the world. And when we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, that's a good chunk of the entire world. Now, I'm not saying to do away with medical practice or medical knowledge. No, have it a part of our basic education and to learn it right, to learn it correctly. That way we can, protect our families. We can treat our own wounds. And, if we need to get x-rays done, I'm sure that there will be clinics available. However, x-rays themselves, that does a lot of damage as well to the person. That's what's with the lead, coverings because of sterilization, which you get informed of, but it's not like you have any choice in that once you're in the room, but smile. So anyway, try and make the best of what we got, and hopefully we get this resolved, because obviously this type of enslavement and murder, it cannot continue. It cannot take place, and it dates all the way back to, well, yeah, the Nuremberg War, Second World War, as you know, around here, the war that followed the Great War, because essentially Germany had no money for any military. They were totally bankrupt. Their money meant nothing. It still is nothing. When we look at a 1910 Deutschmark, worth 1,000 Deutschmarks would be a year's wage over there back then. And now, even still to this day, even though it's over 100 years old, it should be at least considered old money. It's only worth like $1.90 or something on eBay. It's absolutely nothing. Now, because they had no money, as soon as Dr. Warburg had published his Hallmarks of Cancer, of how to cultivate your neoplasm in another person by these methods, which was a sales pitch of how to get their economy going, and new face of their war with their manipulation and enslavement, they had been, well, winning invisibly, because we still have the doctrine of how our medical should work. Like we are supposed to have a hospital system to help people, but do we need a hospital system at all is a question, especially when we're talking usually you only go to a hospital if you have injury. And if it's just mainly the cancer and the AIDS and these type of issues, like a disease that's caused by anticholinergic, like neurological diseases like Parkinson's and such, like epilepsy, it's really horrific. That's why it has to end now, because after all, an anticholinergic is what we consider a drug, and that's supposed to be banned and illegal, whereas medicine actually derives from our vitamins, and that means all the performance enhancing vitamin or like their metabolites that through our metabolic system is how we attain these type of medicines, and a healthy diet is really what's needed. If you remember the 4 healthy food groups that we were taught about a long time ago, well, that is the type of health that we need. We need that more than anything. We need the wholesome, honest truth, and the whole truth. Like, you gotta understand what I'm talking about, because I myself, I understand medical science perfectly, as well as I understand psychology very well indeed, because I didn't happen to read the Douglas College curriculum that my mother had when she was taking the courses, and I skimmed through the book as quickly as I could. I was really more interested in learning something that was interesting, and well, it seems to help, and I suggest it for everyone. Like a part of our education system, have a reform system of our education system where we don't need imprisonments either, any form of imprisonment, because essentially, why do you get punished? So you learn something, isn't it? You want them to learn something, because if they learn the wrong things, obviously, like they go squirrely and get right into all these different aspects of criminality, because now they think that's all they are, and they can't get a job, and they're just doomed to that, but they're getting released in the couple. So then they're released out onto the public, doing all this type of stuff. Where if we were to teach them the golden rule, we're to teach them a bit about religion, because religion essentially relays on perfectionism and the golden rule in any culture, because we all speak different languages. The story came out a little bit differently for all of us, but we still have that core where, we got to love thy neighbors, we love thyself. It means like an eye for an eye. It means, it means balance, like a yin and the yang. So, because, cause and effect, that's basically the structure of karma when we look at, the law of averages. That's maybe, a red card will go, but that means because red card already happened, black card's going to happen. Right, so that's how we got to see it, and by understanding this type of stuff, we have to sort it out, because through an education system. Now, if we're talking about a residential education system where the money from all of the medical goes into our education system instead, where we also have housing for all of the poor people and who get an education and can learn hands-on, be paid for that hands-on time as a trainee would. Like a trainee, they're getting their education hands-on right then and there. So if we're to take a look at what's already in the associations of our communities, then we already see a structure that has kind of forged itself. Time and time again, this is how it's done. It shows you how it is supposed to be unveiled.